Well, good morning, and this one, we're just going to have a look at this fellow. This is the Irish Army's M27 helmet that was in service with the Irish military till about 1939, from about 1927. Now, the story behind it, the Irish Defence Forces, the Irish Army as it were, early in the 1920s, they've had the Irish Civil War. They're now setting up an armed force, and they are looking to equip that armed force with a tin helmet. They start off by looking at the French Adrian helmet and don't really like it because of, you know, it's already known to, as I mentioned in the previous video, to have really about only half the protective value of a British Brodie helmet in the First World War. They then they actually ask the German embassy in Ireland to say, they write to them and they say, could you send us some German helmets so that we could have a look at them? And some of that correspondence actually amazingly still exists. And they get a response in November 1926 from the German embassy, which is basically to say, look, we can't sell you these helmets because of the Versailles Peace Treaty bans the export of helmets as part of military equipment. So the Germans sort of kind of back out, but they're interested in what's going on because they actually report a year later who does get the contract. So what are the Irish military going to do? They like the helmet. Couple of reasons behind it. One, actually, if you look at what was probably the most effective bit of headgear in the First World War in terms of protection, it was the German M16 Stahlhelm, this fellow. It worked very, very well in terms of the level of protection it gave. So on one sense, you can see the Germans, or rather the Irish, they're using, you know, look, a scientific analysis. This seems to be the best helmet. We need to take this on. There's another element which you can't help think comes into play, which goes along the lines that Ireland's had a civil war. It's been trying to throw off British occupation rule for quite some time. And the Germans were the ones that were helping the IRA by running guns, etc., to them during the war years and offering support from that point of view. And by the selection of this helmet as slightly symbolic, it was an obvious, to me, a bit of a, you know, fingers up to the British, because we're going a different direction. We're not part of that colonial empire anymore in that way, and we're siding somewhere else. Now, again, you know, another whole story there. 1 million Irish fought on the Western Front in the First World War, got treated very badly when they came back. You know, lots of political issues going around at the time. But you can't help but feel, as I say, that perhaps influenced the Irish desire for this helmet, as well as the fact it was a very effective helmet, but they can't get it from the Germans. So where do they go? So they actually go to the British company of Vickers, and which again in itself seems to be a bit of an irony. Vickers, an order is put with Vickers for 5,000 helmets, and I've got the quote here because 16th of August the following year, 1927, the Germans are writing back that Vickers have been asked to deliver these 5,000 helmets, quote, to be tested for their to be tested for their expediency during the autumn manoeuvres next year. And so why is that? So Vickers, some accounts say they've got hold of the German presses, that they're actually using the German presses to make these in Britain. Other accounts, you know, it's hard to sort of say because they're arguing that there is a bit of difference between the shapes of the two. Therefore, if they were the same moulds exactly, that would be unlikely, wouldn't it? But there are differences what comes out with the Vickers one. The first thing to notice is on the front, there's two little brass hooks are welded on the very front of the helmet. That's a classic indication it's a Vickers made helmet for the Irish military. And those two little brackets are there to hold the Irish Army badge. It's a small badge which basically on it says FS, Fianna Fáil, or Soldiers of Destiny, as that's called. And those small brackets, they're there. They hold the badge. It's like an officer's cap badge, really, that was there, but it was issued. You could take it off, but again, for parades, etc., you put that one on. So that indicates very much it's one of these Vickers. If you weigh the helmets as well, I found this interesting because there's indications 10,021 of these ultimately get made for the Irish Army. When you see them in photographs, even in photographs from 1927 onwards to 39 when they come out of service, you can see they've quite a number have got dents on. And again, some accounts say Vickers didn't use as higher grade or protective as steel as the original German M16, which is why there's a number of dents appearing there. And when I weighed the helmets, this is a shell, that's a shell. The M16 shell, about 2.5 pounds in weight. This one, 2 pounds. So it's definitely lighter, and both of them missing their liners there. So don't take that as gospel about what these things weighed complete that way. They're made in Vickers in Newcastle. They're then sent over to Ireland. The liners are copied again from that German M16 model, but they're actually made in Dublin by a company, T. Smith and Sons. And you can see that they have a leather band that's stamped on there. Two sizes, same, so it'll say large or small on the leather band, and on here they're marked with a series of markings at the back of the rear. So again, from the point of view, if you're actually looking at one of those, what do those markings mean? There's a V Limited, Vickers Limited manufacturer from that point of view, helmet number, H for helmet, and then a number up to the 10,000 lot that way. And then a little A with a plus, or a little A with a minus, and that's a size, with the plus large, with the minus small. These helmets are in service. You'll see photographs of them being used by the Irish Army up to, as I mentioned, 39, 1940. They're withdrawn. You'll see again that they then move on actually to the British Mark II helmet. They take that into service. They're reissued for civil defence, and they're painted white. And most examples that survive, there's probably about 5,000 of them out there somewhere potentially. Most examples that survive have got that white, rather awful finish to them because they weren't really looked after. They were then put into a store that was obviously damp. This one's lost its lining. It's still got its original German style as well. The chin strap's very much German style and way of doing it. But that they were issued out to civil defence forces. And the story of these goes that once those badges were taken off, they were renumbered on the bottom. So there is a second set of numbers on the bottom there. But once they were withdrawn, put into stores, presumably not particularly, as I mentioned, well looked after that way. But then half of those, the story is that in maybe about 1970, they were crushed and put in the ground as part of the basically the substructure of a building that was being done for the Irish Army, in almost like the fillings of footings there sort of thing. And again, everyone says, oh, what a waste, what a shame, and all those sorts of things. But whether or not there was that same level of interest at the time. So that, I hate to say, even though this looks pretty poor, that's not dissimilar to the state you'll find a lot of these in. There are some in museums that are still in the bottle green colour. They were painted for the Irish Army with their original badges on. Most of the rest of these, I'm afraid to say, you'll either, if they're in good order, they're probably been repainted or tidied up, unlike this one, which, again, it'll be very typical of those you find around the place. So the Irish Army's M27 helmet, for someone, if you're interested in, or you come from a British, maybe even American background, when you look at this sort of thing, it always seems a bit surprising seeing that Germanic style of helmet on troops from somewhere in the British Isles. And but it's the same again with after World War II, where you see a number of other countries using the World War II style German helmet well up into the 70s, 80s, 90s, not that long ago, for parades in places like Chile, Argentina, etc., where those style of helmets were taken on. So there you go. Thank you.